Welcome, and we'll start the monthly meeting of the Cook County Housing Redevelopment Authority. First of all, I note the presence of a quorum with Commissioners Olson, Hanson, and O'Brien, and Lamour, and Gabler. Also appreciate the presence of the County Board Commissioners, Commissioner Gamble and Commissioner Sullivan. We appreciate your being here and your support. And with that, we'll go to approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move to approve the agenda.
I'll second that.
Now seconded. All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved. Approval of the March 19th, 2025 minutes. We need a motion on that as well, please.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? At this stage, it's the time we offer an opportunity for public comment. And if there's any comments to be had, it doesn't appear that there are, but we do have to, at this stage, open a public hearing that we need to hold for the purposes of conveying Cook County-owned land to Hamilton Habitat LLC for the purposes of workforce housing construction. So we'll call the public hearing to order at 3:03 p.m. And first, Jeff will describe what we're involved in here, and then we'll invite the public to comment. Jeff, please.
So this was on the agenda last month, but we had to have public notice in the local newspaper, which we do have, and that's all part of your packet as well. So what we're doing right now is we're conveying some land parcel that the Cook County Commissioners took action on back in January. And this will be the conveyance of some land to Hamilton Habitat so they can build a couple of additional homes, workforce homes specifically, in the community of Grand Marais. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them for you. You'll also find some information in your packet, resolution 25-3. Yep, and 25-4.
Any comments from the public? It doesn't appear that there are any, so we'll close the public hearing at 3:04 p.m. and go to new business. And the first new business issue is resolution approving the acceptance of real property from Cook County for the purpose of supporting the construction of single-family homes in Grand Marais. There's an Exhibit 1 attached. Can we hear a motion, or is there any discussion on it first? Hearing no discussion, is there a motion to approve the acceptance of the real estate?
I'll move acceptance of resolution number 25-03.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. Any further comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Second is resolution authorizing the executive director to enter into a land sale agreement with Hamilton Habitat for the purpose of conveying a real property for the supporting the construction of 2 single-family homes. And there's a couple of exhibits that are attached to that. So is there any discussion or thoughts on it?
Chair Gabler, I do have one thing to mention. Mike Roth was here just a few minutes before the meeting started, and he wanted to point out that when the survey was made, either it had been or it had not been included in this parcel ID that you'll find on page 11 through 13. But we want to make sure that that drainage ditch at the south end of the property is not conveyed with the property to the Hamilton Habitat folks. That's city-owned property, and they do the maintenance of the drainage ditch, and we want to make sure that those owners are continuing to do that. So we just want to make sure that, what we're selling through the county doesn't include the drainage ditch.
That's called the town ditch.
Town ditch.
Jeff, for your information.
Good to know.
It sounds like
I'll get you a T-shirt. It has quite a reputation.
It's pretty cool for keeping Grand Marais from washing into the lake. It's done its job for many years.
Well, any further discussion? Is there a motion on the, at this stage approve?
Move to approve.
Okay, move to approve. Is there a second for that?
A second?
There is a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Chair, if I could just ask a question relative to that motion, that what Mike Roth brought to our attention on that in the conveyance, that survey then, in fact, clarifies that so that there's no question because it's in the language of the survey.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks.
On page 11 of your packet, you'll notice that there was a picture, and it looks like it was south of that. And he just wanted, and sometimes with those types of maps, things wander, but they're not meant to. And so the survey itself on page 15 is very adequate for what we're going to do. Yep.
All right, let's move to other business. Let's start with the director's report.
Yeah, in fact, I'm going to try to do a little bit of stalling because we do have a guest coming in to talk a little bit about one of the things that we're talking about on item D, the residential open space overlay district. If Neva Maxwell isn't here quite yet, we'll just kind of move on past D and then come back to it if you're okay with that. Or somebody wants to sing a song maybe. At any rate, the first thing I wanted to talk about was Gunflint View. As you know, May 1st is their opening date. And they had a previous open house on March 2nd. I wasn't able to attend, unfortunately. Some of the commissioners weren't able to as well. But we had a good group of people, including Linda Jurek from the Visit Cook County. That came as well, and we toured the facility, and I was really impressed. It looked like the commissioners were really impressed with seeing it. Also, Callie Hawkins from WTIP was in attendance with us. She actually did a story about it today on the news hour, and it was, I think, a well put together story about what we had seen and heard and what's happening at the Gunflint View. Right now, 26 units as of the 9th of April are filled, with 8 moving in on May 1st, and so it's exciting that we're starting to see people move in. There was some question in the story about where they're coming from and who they are, what their age and demographics. I will be interested to see maybe if we can get some of that information as things fill up. And so I'm excited to know more about that as well. But, you know, right now it sounds like all the studio apartments are spoken for. And there's a couple of 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom options available in the 80% AMI category, and the rest of them are market rate. So there's opportunity for a lot of people still in the community. And yeah, Gunflint View, I will say that I'm glad I don't have to be the one painting all those walls, but it looked like there was a small army of people that are really into the painting and the final finishings, putting up the ceiling fans and things of that nature to really make it sparkle and shine for the new guests that arrive here soon. So that's what I wanted to mention about Gunflint View. Any questions about the tour or anything like that? Anything? Yes.
I'd just like to make a couple comments. WTIP, in addition to putting it on their news hour, also put an article, and there are links in there that people can easily access. Floor plans, how many 2-bedrooms are left, how many 1-bedrooms. So that's important for the public to know and for all of us to share with everyone that we interact with.
Sounds like a virtual visit might be in order, just to go review all that and
Yeah.
see where they are. Thank you.
Yeah. There's item B, office rent, and so Director Krampus, just it's perfect timing. we had a conversation between Chair Gabler and myself, and EDA Director Krampus and Peter Kleshold from the EDA as well, about some of the rent that we have in that building that we rent out of downtown. And Chair Gabler wanted to kind of take this subject and talk about it a little bit more.
And I'll speak for the Finance Committee as well on this subject. First of all, neither the executive director nor the chair of either board are still in their office that put the original deal together. And the original deal was having us pay $150 a month for office space, and it's on the second floor of the Jeremy Riddlebauer's business across from Fisherman's Daughter, and to be honest, Jason was really hardly ever in the office. Even when he was in town, he was either operating out of his car or out of his house if he wasn't in town, and he had a desk in the little common area that exists in that office, and just wasn't at it very often, and so perhaps that rent reflected all of that, however it was arrived at. But at $150, the total rent for the unit, the whole space, that is the EDA's space, they're the lessee on it, and is $1,300 a month. And so they asked if we would look at reconfiguring, and they were willing to reconfigure to actually let our executive director sit in one of the palatial suites that overlooks the harbor and the Fisherman's Daughter. But so there's an actual office now that Jeff occupies, and the EDA has been very good to us in terms of a partner cooperating and providing printers and some of the hardware that's in there and all that. But at this stage, they asked if we could look at reconsidering it, and we did look at reconsidering it and understand their concern, and so we believe we've come to a conclusion that would help, I think, make it a fair situation. They do have, Heidi is, the director is there one week a month. Otherwise, she's operating virtually. So she has moved to where the space Jason was in, and the Jason desk, I think, and the other office is still occupied by the SBDC, Small Business Development consultant, who's there half-time and needs a place to interview prospective business owners and that kind of thing. So all in all, we've worked out a deal that we think is fair, and we've heard from the EDA, they think it's fair, and it's certainly going to have a budget impact for us because our rent will go from basically $150 to $575. The rest is the EDA's load to carry, but it really is a fair division of the space, and Commissioner O'Brien and I, the Finance Committee, are convinced that this is fair, and it'll result in additional expense out of our budget, and will be beyond our office budget for sure by probably $4,000 to $5,000. It might be something more or less than that, but we do have a contingency, and frankly, we do have a couple other line items that I can see are unlikely to reach the full budget allowed for them. So I'm not personally concerned, and as a Finance Committee. So with that, we'd recommend that we authorize the Executive Director to continue, and we will be paying the rent either directly to Jeremy Riddlebauer, the landlord, or to the EDA, either way, but our rent's going to go up as the final analysis, but so is our space, and so is our the time that we'll be using it, because Jeff intends to use it quite differently than Jason did, and so that's where we are. That's the report of the Finance Committee, I guess. But could we have a motion authorizing Jeff to enter into an agreement with the ADA for in the ballpark of that negotiation?
So moved.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
How are you configuring the spaces? Is it different than?
It's the same space, but instead of being a solo desk out in a common area, there's actually an office that with a door that can be closed, and Executive Director Krampitz was already good enough to have done the heavy lifting of moving the stuff in there that Jeff needed, and so we appreciate the partnership we've had with the ADA, and the lease, at this stage, the lease rent isn't going up. The lease goes till June of next year, And so then there's a question of what to do after that. Do we want to stay there, or is there some other options? And I know there's a couple of other people who have ideas about where we could be or should be, and so that's yet to be determined, but we'll do that in partnership with the EDA again, because the two agencies work together so much and have so much interconnections with the applications and administration of grants and those kind of things. And we just appreciate their cooperation that and the support they've shown. Any other questions, comments? If not, I'll call the motion. Motion to approve.
Aye.
Did it get moved and seconded?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. Then the motion's approved, and we'll continue on.
Might as well grab the next one, too.
Strategic plan update, yes. I think the consensus of the board was to have Mary Somnus act as our coordinator or convener of perhaps a half-day session to update our strategic plan. The current strategic plan was done late in 2023, and things have certainly changed since then, and there's a lot of, we've got things under construction, and I think we can get a better feel for what is really not just the need, which is what a study showed in 2018, but what's the market for things, and then also some of the positive things we've done and some of the times we haven't been successful, and looking at those and thinking, gee, is there something in our plan that we really should look at? And so the goal is to find something that would work for everybody, and Mary will be certainly available in June, and talking to her, the thought came up, what if we did try to do this on the day of our June monthly meeting here? So in other words, start maybe around 11, have some box lunches, and work until the board meeting at 3. That'd be at least convenient, it sounds like it, but I'm interested in the commissioner's thoughts of, does that make sense? And are you able, at this stage, this far in advance, to be able to, think you might attend?
I think it sounds good.
And if you're looking at your calendars, it's going to be June 18th.
Well, I think we'll tentatively set that date up and encourage Mary to be thinking about it, and certainly I'll be thinking about it, but please look at that strategic plan and give it some thought in context of what we now know after 3+ years of operation, and it'd be interesting. So appreciate your support on that.
Chair Gabler?
Yeah.
Would you like me to reserve this room for the strategic plan?
That'd be terrific.
I will do that right now.
Perfect.
You continue to be a great American in my view, so by your offer to do that, thank you, Commissioner
Absolutely.
Sullivan.
Either that or Jeff's new office, so.
Yeah.
Well, it's not that palatial. I was perhaps exaggerating. But
You can all sit on the floor in a
nice
circle.
I'm gonna have to move the
Well,
cot.
there is a round table out in the common area that's a conference table, but I think we'd be better off here.
We have the room.
All right.
All right.
Great. I think let's try to go, Commissioner O'Brien.
Well, I was going to suggest as well that maybe in the weeks leading up to that strategic plan, that we, maybe some of us put our heads together as to what would be good, useful pre-meeting information to have in hand. That might include the lease-up rates or the experience of the two, or of the Gunflint View project, any updates on the Heights, might include background information on some other categories of housing that we really haven't focused on. I'm spitballing, but I think that they would be useful to have to all collectively come in into the meeting with some common, potential issues, with some background information on some potential issues that we might specifically discuss.
Perfect.
Great suggestion. Thank you.
And I'll put together maybe an email And then you can email me directly if you think something's not on that list, but I took a couple of things down and we can start putting that together for you all. Maybe in the interest of time, waiting for Neva to show up here. She's got a meeting right now, that's why she's booked up, and she's not ignoring us, so that's for sure. She's working. But maybe we'll go to the financials next if Chris.
Yeah, I don't have I don't have a presentation prepared for the financials. I did review the financial report, and, you know, we had just, everything looked in order. There were a couple of question marks that got cleared up right away.
Yeah.
But everything appeared in order. One of the things that I do want to work with Director on is, for my edification as much as anything else, is to have what I would term a dashboard of existing projects, just so, you know, it's more transparent to me, you know, what projects are in the hopper, what commitments have been, what funding commitments have been made to each of the projects from where, and where are the gaps, and, you know, just to, you know, so I don't have to go scratching through my notes every time. Just
I think on finances, one of the things that I'm interested in is that I know we have a $250,000 loan out to One Roof up on the Birch Cliff.
Birchwood Apartments.
Birchwood Apartments,
Yeah.
yeah. And at this stage, they're certainly in the process of redoing unit by unit and getting the places up to snuff. But I can't recall myself just the terms of that loan. I know it's to be repaid. It's a loan. It's not, was not set up as a grant, and but it enabled them to be able to get comfortable with submitting an application to do the, take it over and do renovation. But if you could, that might be one of the things to put as an example of what Commissioner O'Brien's talking about.
Yeah.
Put on that, into that discussion. And I don't know if we've got any of those others that are repayable, but that one is large enough. $250,000 is a chunk of change, as they say,
Yeah.
and it would give us some abilities to participate in other things too.
Yeah, that's a good example of what I'd like to have on a reference sheet. Just say, you know, there's
Possibly continuing on in the same vein of financials, and what Commissioner O'Brien mentioned is other types of housing, and, you know, looking at what we might be involved in. The EDA, at least has, one of their commissioners has been actively engaged in the idea of promoting assisted living housing in Cook County, and to that end, someone, I assume it was driven by either the EDA or their commissioner, and
The EDA as a whole.
pardon me?
Not the EDA as a whole.
Okay, it was Commissioner Howard
Hedstrom,
Hedstrom, who's been interested in this before. This isn't anything new, but he got a proposal from Whipfley, who did the market study in 2018 for Cook County, and this proposal's in front of you for $14,000 to do a market, update that in terms of the market for assisted living. And I think, so the question is, this is something I think that would be in our bailiwick, and if that's the case, we should be driving it, not the EDA, unless we'd certainly be happy to ask the EDA to participate financially in it. But always, if you don't ask, you don't get. That's one thing I know. But so Heidi, be ready. But nonetheless, I do think, you know, it's certainly worth some effort, and usually nothing will happen until a developer gets engaged or enough to say, I'm going to put some money into this, and, you know, and put together a front end, and I can understand the risk. And I understand the need for assisted living, and I know there's none in Cook County, but most of the assisted living I'm familiar with from Twin Cities and other areas too, St. Cloud or Duluth, it's usually in connection with apartments or nursing facilities also, so you've got kind of a continuum of care to go to. It doesn't have to be. There are certainly freestanding assisted living things, but I'm also cautious only just watching the rent-up of the 2 apartment buildings we've got going, in the sense that those units are at rents that Cook County really hasn't seen before in any numbers, and there's a difference between need and demand or market, and that's kind of what I'm thinking we need to be very careful with in this endeavor as well. Believe me, I'm not speaking against it, but I just, at this stage, I'm cautious, and it does sound like Howard Hedstrom has somebody already at least involved in in discussions of potentially doing this, and you know there's a site that they've got in mind to do it as well, and so those are positive aspects, but I'm also concerned, to be honest, with what the federal government is doing at this stage, because a lot of the assisted living and then nursing home patients and clients are paid for by Medicaid. And if that starts getting cut, or Medicare and Medicaid, that's a measure of risk for a developer that, you know, they're all people who do this know the market and know, you know, and they're probably looking at the impact of those cuts really intensely because they've got existing developments that could be affected by it. But it's just another reason for me to just be cautious about it. And so I think what I'd like to do is have our director keep in touch with the discussions on it, and possibly at some point the board needs to get involved in it as well. But at least I do want to continue the momentum, but I'm certainly not at this stage ready to recommend $14,000 for a demand study.
I'd suggest that this is an excellent topic of conversation for our strategic planning.
It really is.
Because we really can discuss this in depth and delve into the history. One thing that might be interesting for Director Brand to get in touch with Carefree Living. I can't remember where they're based, but they own a bunch of assisted living.
They have one in Silver Bay.
Yeah, they're not based there, though. Grand Rapids, does anybody remember?
It seems like
Anyway, they were very interested in coming here back in 2020, 2019, and they put a lot of work into it, I know. And then just sort of off the record, I was walking through my campground one day and fell into conversation with a woman, and I said, "Where are you from?" And she told me, and I said, "What do you do?" She said, "I work for Carefree Assisted Living." And I was like, "Oh, you're going to build a place in Grand Marais?" And she said, "That's all our executive director talks about, is the Grand Marais facility. He's gung-ho for it."
Yeah.
And then ultimately it failed because of economy of scale. And they really need to build, if I recall correctly, and this is just from my memory, they need to build 55 rooms in order to make it pay, especially with memory care involved. And the previous study from 2018 indicated 20 to 30 was the demand here. Now, I take some exception with that. And I also take some exception with the methodology outlined in here. It's when you get down to small numbers like that, it's hard to, the methodology is sort of aimed at municipalities or counties that have hundreds of thousands of people, and then the demographics are, if they're off by a bit, it doesn't matter. But here, 10 people is a huge difference.
Right.
And I would argue that some people that would be patrons of assisted living, well, basically everyone who wants to be a patron of assisted living leaves the county now. So we're not counting them. They would be here in assisted living. So to count just the people who are here, like me and maybe some of the rest of us in here, who are thinking, "Oh, I might be one of those people," in 30, 40 years. That's not really fair, just to see what's the potential, because, and I also think that people would move here. Grand Marais is different, or Cook County, I should say, is different because people would move here more willingly to be near their kids and grandkids, I think, because of the amenities that we have, because it's a beautiful place to live. So that would give us an advantage as opposed to something that's off in the sticks somewhere. So So all those things, I think, are just things that went through my mind, but I think we could have a lot. But if you could reach out to assist and see if they are willing to share what their thoughts were back then, if there's anybody there with that institutional memory, that would be,
Resource.
yeah, it'd be good to know what because they were really, they put a lot into it, I know. And my mom actually I have personal stake in this, not only for myself, but when my mom required assisted living, she went to Silver Bay to a carefree facility.
Okay.
And so I was in there, at least twice a week for 2.5 years and got to see how it operated. Actually, several of the people that work there now work at North Shore Health. But they commute up. But that was, it was an impressive facility. But again, I think that was about 60 rooms, half memory care, or I don't know if it's half, but one side was memory care, one side was assisted living. So yeah, I'd really put this on the agenda for the strategic planning, and we should talk about it.
Okay.
Good suggestion. Other thoughts here?
I was just going to agree with the point that Cook County is definitely an edge case. We're out on the far tail of the bell curve, so to speak, and so any of the methodology, I think, needs to reflect the uniqueness of this community, and I agree that strategic planning is probably the venue to talk about it in greater detail.
If I may, a couple of thoughts that I've had about this. I brought this up at last month's meeting just so I could get in contact with Whipley. The person that is mentioned in here, his name is Patrick Carroll. He was part of the study in 2018. And so this is a newer, it's a refreshment of the 2018 study, which I'm sure is information that's good information from a few years back at least. I think an update to the study would probably show, a little bit more information about what it looks like now. We were very close in 2018 to getting this project, and actually Howard Hedstrom was able to give this information to me, and I believe I emailed it to you last night, but I should email it to everybody now that I think of it. But the Community Assessment Development Group was behind, and they had basically a footprint for the lodge at Howard Lake Assisted Living. They were basically copying what they did in Howard Lake, Fort Grand Marais, if you might remember that.
20 units, I believe.
24 to 30 is what
Which
the
is-
strong market
yeah.
study was. And honestly, that's one aspect of what we might be able to accomplish with a building like this, but maybe there's some opportunity for us to start looking at some homes for people that don't need that level of treatment, but also want to step down from what they have currently in town. There might be some option to do a mix of elder housing and assisted living, and that might give a little bit more diversity to the support and the financial wherewithal for that organization to facilitate. A couple of other things I was thinking of, I think is if we were to decide to do something like this, I think it would be worth us having a joint meeting with the EDA and the HRA together in the same room to have that conversation before we pull a trigger like that. Of course, a study would be information that we could all use. There's an argument to be made that the information, a refreshment to the information would be beneficial to anybody who might want to participate in an RFP, which I think is what the EDA, or at least a member of the EDA had mentioned last month, and maybe even last night as well, is an RFP for, let's see who even wants to do this. And of course, housing in this area, like a lot of places in Minnesota, is a math problem. Myself, we'll have to start looking at how do we fund this thing properly so that way it can have the best advantage of the community for the long term. So a couple of things to consider there. The Patrick Carroll was very interested in possibly doing like a Zoom meeting with EDA and HRA to talk a little bit more about the proposal and answer any questions that might have come out of that. I suggested not having that today, but maybe into the near future if we decided we wanted to go that far too.
Yeah, it feels like we're jumping fast on this, on the study. I guess it's an open question in my mind whether we need the study. I think, as we said, I think we should do nothing until we have a chance to discuss it at the strategic meeting where, we can decide if this is an avenue we want to pursue, what are the pros and cons. I think as a precursor to that, we can all make sure that we all review the 2018 study. I think that'll give us some background information. Yes, a refresh might be helpful, but I'm not sure it's a critical path for us right now. And it's a lot of money. It's a big chunk, and we don't have it in our budget. Sorry.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Gamble.
Yeah, I know, we touched on this in our previous meeting, and my recommendation is with the projects in place that we should learn from that experience. And when you mentioned earlier about the demographic, who's in the building? And my wife and I have managed the housing for 15 years, and the number of studies that I've participated in, and knowing the demographic and the issues that I deal with, which I talk about in other boards that I sit on that are relevant. The other thing in a smaller community, that our partnerships are critical to our effectiveness. And so when we look at the clinic, we look at the hospital, we look at any other entity, be it the EDA, whatever, we need to know the provisions that are in place, because we can't independently handle a lot of these things. But if we do them in partnership, we can do that. This is, in my experience, with people that come in, and we're evaluating people right now that have memory care issues, that they're looking for assisted care. Because of the partnerships that we have provisions, we can do something like that, although we are not assisted care. We used to have those pull things, that if you had a problem, you call it. But we really aren't assisted living, so we couldn't do what we wanted to do. My recommendation would be, because we are Cook County, is that we should have public meeting in each area of the county and ask the people that live in this county, what do you want and what does it look like? These studies like this, I can do a study for you like this. If you want a study done like this, I can get there, because there's a lot of secondary information. The information that is done, that had been by entities that had been here before, exploring it. And it was part of my first term that they were just right on the cusp of wanting to do something, but the market analysis from the financial standpoint in their experience elsewhere said it's not feasible. We've got to find a way to make it feasible in partnership, and we need to match identified need with the people that are within our county, which we can do if we take the initiative to do it and just say, this is a listening session. We identify what it is we want, and that information that is real information relative to us here is what you use in your strategic planning, because it's solid information and not projectable information based upon somebody outside of our unique circumstances. And I'd be happy to provide information for your strategic meeting relative to some things, because there's a lot of information out there. We know that next to Aiken County, we have the largest aging population. And so what are the needs with our housing as they exist right now? Neva's presentation is going to address the fact that we're trying to respond to real need relative to who we are as a community. So that would be my 2 cents worth.
Well, thanks for the thoughts, and I especially like the mention of the hospital as a partner for us, and there are probably other entities as well that deal with the seniors here down at the hub or wherever, and
Care partners?
yeah, care partners especially. So, and I do think our role, it's appropriate for us to be a catalyst. I mean, that's why they gave us this charge, and so that's that's very appropriate, as opposed to the EDA, for example, which I just think they've done it because they had to do it up until the fact we had HRA, and we still have some issues with people who only take applications for assistance from the EDA. But I think those are good suggestions to be thinking about.
Might I ask a clarifying question real quick? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's the Commissioner Sullivan.
Well, I was just saying that we do have all these partners, and I think we really should reach out, that the HRA as a board should reach out not only to the hub, but to care partners. We're an age-friendly community through Public Health and Human Services. There's information, but to find out what do we have here and how can we collaborate. Any kind of grants that we eventually get, if we do decide to move in this direction, are much more powerful if we have all our partners. And I also like the idea of doing this discussion at strategic planning, so that you can perhaps have more of a handle on federal grants, Medicaid, and what we're looking at in the future, because it's really hard to make any decisions right now with so much uncertainty.
That's fair. So clarifying question, but before I end, I just wanted to mention that I have reached out to Care Partners, and I have reached out to Executive Director Kimber Rolstead at the hospital. We're going to have coffee with, together and meet and see what's going on already in the community. I kind of want to make this as a partnership, big a partnership as possible, so I've already kind of identified some of those folks. The Hub was a new one for me, so we're going to put them in the hopper for coffee as well. But if I just wanted to clarify a question to Commissioner Gable. I think what Commissioner Gable had said was before the strategic planning, which we're talking about in June, we should possibly have a community conversation about what do you want to see? Is that what I heard, or did I misunderstand?
From my comment?
Yeah.
I'm saying at some point, I mean, it would be nice, obviously, because good information informs strategic planning. It's just the timing of it, based upon if we're saying we're looking at this in a June meeting or whatever, it's certainly feasible to do. It just, my recommendation is talk to the community and don't take information and project it that's generic in nature. And I think the biggest challenge there is just finding the appropriate time that makes it convenient and going to the locations given the nature of our county and just asking people. And if you identify up front what it is we're asking, we're saying what are you looking for? Because I know what I field in questions, every other day from people that are calling and looking, what can I do? My parents, where do I move them? What do I do? And so I'm just saying, I think people would be willing to give their input that would be solid input based upon our demographic, our population.
So does that sound like something maybe I should spend some time putting together in the next month?
Yeah.
Is a community conversation?
I think
All right.
Well, and I think that as you do that and get a sense of the timing of that, then my recommendation would be that we consider pushing the strategic planning meeting. I think that would be important information to have going in. There may be other information we want to have in place and circulate before the meeting, so maybe we push that back to July. I don't think that's critical. We could check with Chair Somnus, but if it's, we can see how quickly you can get meetings like that scheduled and gather some of this information that we want to have.
I think I'd be more comfortable with keeping our strategic planning, because that's our overall organizational planning, right? Not just this issue. And this is a big, big issue that's going to take a while, if it's done right. So it's a little bit of trying to get all the community input before June or even July is probably not realistic, and that we can just make a note of that as part of the process. As we talk about it, strategic planning, we'll, and try to and start to talk to our partners. Then we can lay out a timeline of, what would be included in there somewhere. But I
Mr. Chair,
don't want to rush it, because I want it to be done well.
No, I understand that, but the recommendation would be that when you look at your existing strategic plan and all of the elements that come to the forefront, that those would be forwarded to Jeff, so that the strategic planning is inclusive of the things that you want to discuss and have there to address. And if you do that, identify what's our goal, what's our ambition, as opposed to following the template that existed back then. And the feasibility of input that would be local relative to how you want to set this on a timing, because it's one component of your overall, that can be looked at. And I would be happy to try to provide what I could for you if the timing issue is an issue, because it is an element that's predicated on where do we do and what are we doing. But Diva's going to address some of that too with what she'll present.
I think it would make more sense to reach out like you're doing to the hospital and the county and the public health, and talk to them from Gary, and talk to them first, and before we do a community-wide thing, because if we rush it, we won't ask the right questions.
Sure.
And it's a little bit, so a little bit of an odd situation. I put on my businessman hat. If I ask you, you going to need assisted living in the next couple of years? You're going to say, no, not me.
And that's true. You don't need it until you need it, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
So there's a little bit of, that's not, doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. We should do it, but yeah, it has to be done carefully, so.
I found a certain level of irony with the conversation that Howard Hedstrom and I had last month, because you'll recall I mentioned that at the meeting last month. somebody walked up to Howard and said, we're moving to assisted living in Crosby.
Yeah.
And that does happen, and if we can retain some of the folks in their community, I think our community's better off for it. I think maybe what we'll do, and another organization that I've already reached out to is the Arrowhead Agency on Aging. And they had some great data, and it's all on my computer. 35% of the people that live in Cook County are 65 plus. So I know that information, at least.
It's going to go up for a little while.
Yeah, it might go up a little
Before
bit.
it goes down, yeah.
And I think as we start having this conversation, I think it's really important that we do a great job of being inclusive, and that means, talking to people on the east end on the Grand Portage Drive as well, because they have aging issues, and we need to address those issues as well. And then on the west end, there's been some conversation about what can we do on the west end. So I do think that we should, I believe we should have a good conversation out of it, but we need to set some parameters for what that can be, and we've got some time to do it. I don't know if we'll be able to do it before the strategic planning, but, it's up to you all to tell me before or after. If you want me to do it beforehand, I could sure work. I know I've got plenty of work to do, but this is also important to our community, and I know some people in our community are really like, can I stay or do I have to leave? And that'll be the consideration for a while until we do something, or continue to not do something, for that matter. The other thing I think is maybe worth considering as well is that I don't know what the state budget's going to look like still. They're still trying to figure that out. Federal budget, question mark. I don't know what that's going to look like. But at the end of the day, we already had talked a little bit about how we can be creative with financing and things of that nature. So we'll continue to scratch our head and think of some ways that maybe we can creatively come up with some financing for something like this perhaps as well. If you don't mind, I've got two things to really quickly touch on, and then I think I'll turn it over to Neva, if that's all right.
That's
In the
fine.
director's report?
It's part of the director's
All right.
report.
The other thing I quickly wanted to mention about the Heights project, I had a pre-development meeting with the contractors and subcontractors and the folks representing the organization on the 3rd of April. And we're ready. They're very ready to go. And so I would see some action on that site in the next week or two at the most. So, and that's going to finish when September, October, somewhere in there. So they're really excited. They've got a very aggressive timeline. It sounds like they're going to start producing the units and being shipped out here 5 semis a day until they get all the units up here, large pieces. There's some conversation about staging, and so we'll see how that goes. And then I also wanted to quickly mention one other development on the Duval property. The developer wants to enter an agreement with with the city for a land sale, so we're working on that. It was suggested that the city would like to visit with the developer about what they're asking the city for, and that meeting will be coming up soon. I'll let you know when that meeting does happen. It might be on the 30th of April, but Mike Roth was mentioning maybe the 14th of May instead. So it'll be exciting for Alex to talk about what his vision still is for that site. And hopefully we can get to a sales agreement here quickly on that as well. The last thing I just wanted to...
Is the 14th meeting the city council or the planning commission?
That's the city council. Yep. Administrator Roth mentioned that we wanted to get in front of the city council to talk about what the ask is, articulate what's the property look like, and then from there, of course, going into some surveying and location of some of the utilities that are on site there as well. So, and then also there was a discussion about using that location for staging, and so that's between the city and Duval Properties and the folks that are putting together the Heights, and so I'm just kind of helping to facilitate what we need to get things moving along. The last thing I just wanted to quickly mention, and I'm going to blame Commissioner Hanson for this. In a previous meeting, there was some dialogue about the community not really knowing what we do at the HRA. And so I thought about this for a while. It's not something that was knee-jerk. It's been something I thought about since I started here. And so I created an Instagram account to kind of get people to understand a little bit more about what we do. Instagram is usually a story and pictures with a little bit of text to kind of explain what the picture is. And so I've taken the liberty to post 5 stories. We've got 20 followers. It's pretty small right now, but snowball starts little, and it's big. What we're really trying to do is educate and inform people what we do here in the county, in the community. And so 5 posts. One was just quickly on Friday, I went over to Grand Portage. I was invited by Superintendent Boyd to talk a little bit about housing needs at the monument, National Monument. And they got a copy of our study, housing study, to help them determine what the needs are on the east end and that sort of thing. And we had a great conversation about that. I just took a picture of the building and the Palisades outside and posted it there. And got a couple of likes. So, I mean, it's something, I think it's informative, it's educational. That's all I really wanted it to be, but clue people in about what we're doing. And, so that's all I had for this month. Any questions for me? Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Neva to talk about the open space overlay district.
Is the Duval project the same as the former Bjorkburg project, or is that the?
No, this would be the Tom Tabota site, right?
Right.
Oh, okay, got it, okay, that was going to be my question. Okay,
61.
got it.
Yes.
1842.
Yes, right, exactly.
It has several names. We should settle on a name for that.
We should settle on a name, but first we gotta get a sales agreement before we can settle on a name.
Okay.
But not to add more to the discussion, but the Bjorkburg project is something that I believe the planning commission at the city will actually be looking at in the next month or so. And I'll let you guys know when that meeting is happening too.
Okay, good, thanks.
Well, the importance of that project on 61 Duval, or whatever the name is that it's already had a commitment from the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency.
Right.
That's the first time they paid any attention to Cook County and or even to a lot of the communities up in northeastern Minnesota particularly. And so that is really a project we want to stay in touch with and focus on and devote our resources to by all means.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll have that conversation, as we get closer to the land sale and the next parts of that process. I'm excited about that. I've talked to Alex, I think, every week for the last month and a half. So we're really having good communication about the needs and what we need to do.
I'd like to meet this person sometime.
And he is interested in coming up.
Yeah.
And so, yep, when he does, we'll make sure you can connect with him.
Thanks.
You bet. So Neva, I think, Neva Maxwell is here to talk a little bit about an idea that she had. She asked me for some advice, and I was really happy to think about this and digest a newer idea for housing in Cook County. Not a new idea, it's been around for a little while, at least conceptually, right? And now we're getting closer to maybe making this a reality, so I'll turn over the microphone to you so you can explain it to us and get our feedback, of course.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Neva Maxwell. I'm the Planning and Zoning Administrator in Cook County Land Services Office. I've been in Cook County since 2021, where my realtor pointed out to me as we were walking through our house at the final sale of, I think this might be the last affordable house in Cook County. And it was twice the price of any house I ever thought I'd buy. So the affordable housing thing has been on my radar for quite a while. And so since I've been here, I've been pondering what zoning can do to try to be a part of the solution and not further aggregate already complicated factors before us. And so, Jana, if you want to get the PowerPoint going there. The ideas I have before you is using 2 zoning tools that I'll explain in further detail, but the primary objective is to address affordable housing at its key part. Every part of these different restrictions, limitations I've put into these ideas is specifically to think of a way to create housing that's not going to get outcompeted by the second home market. I once asked one of the land use attorneys that we work with, is there any way I could prohibit second homes or just make it so you could only be homesteaded on a property in an area? He said, no, that's a taking. You can't do that. So, okay, fine. Won't do that. So no takings of constitutional rights or anything like that is going to be done in this effort. So what is before you is the proposed residential open space overlay district is what I'm calling it. And you guys just talked about name, nomenclature. I'm open for suggestions if there's a more exciting name, but this is what we've set on. It's ROSO. It's not the best acronym, but it's still up for modifications at this point. This is all just ideas. Jana, it's not doing the thing. There's something about this.
Press the button.
I gotta fix the title slide or something. It's happened yesterday too. Yeah, see, maybe, let me try on this next. Yeah, it's just that title slide. That's all we gotta fix.
Plenty.
I don't know, it's wonky. So that might look weird on your little screens up there, but just for background for anyone watching and for yourselves, Cook County has countywide zoning. So the colorful Cook County map there is a picture of the Cook County zoning map. And the white is largely public property, but it's actually the FAR1 zone district. And then the orange is the FAR2 zone district, where you can only have as small as a 10-acre lot size. And then the yellow is the 5-acre minimum lot size zone district. And everywhere that we're talking in today is going to be in the orange and the yellow locations that has immediate access off of a state, township, or county road. Those are kind of the geographic areas to focus in on. So we're not going to be looking at something way far out in the sticks. The idea is have something close to a road so that road infrastructure is already nearby. Cook County, 9% privately owned. I'm sure you're aware of some of these statistics. In my conversations with different contractors, you know, the beginning estimates for just getting infrastructure on your lot is about $60,000. So septics are starting at $30,000, quite often more than that for a single-family home. Private well drilling, about $20,000. Obviously, it depends on how deep they have to go. And then you put in the driveway and the electric, another $10,000. You get to $60,000 pretty quickly, and that's not even the cost of the land. So we're trying to kind of cue in on some of those numbers. Contractors are obviously in high demand. Frankly, they can make a lot of money building second homes, and it's a private industry. So that's what these regulations are trying to do, is find a way to make the numbers work for the contractors, so to say. We already talked about the zoning patterns, and then one thing that's working in our favor, our current zoning already is rather favorable for your dwelling development. So in Cook County, on every residential parcel, you get one primary dwelling, and then you also get one guest cabin, regardless of your lot size. In some counties, you would need double the minimum lot size standards for your zone district. So if you were in a 5-acre minimum area, you need to have 10 acres in order to have that second dwelling. We don't implement any kind of provisions like that in Cook County. So we already are rather generous on that side of things compared to other counties. And I want you to kind of keep that in mind as we think through these numbers, because it could kind of seem alarming to someone to think what I'm proposing. But I think if you keep in mind that every residential lot already gets 2 dwellings, you'll see that we're actually kind of staying even with the total number of dwelling units that could be developed in a certain area. And also, I'm totally okay if you want to interrupt me. So if there's something that I said that you think totally doesn't click, please let me know, because I'm working on my messaging on some of these ideas. So I'd like to know what I say that doesn't make sense to someone.
What are the restrictions on the size of the second dwelling you mentioned? Was you can put a cabin, or are there restrictions on how
Yep.
big a house that is?
That's a great point. We don't have size restrictions on the second dwelling either. So in other counties too, they would restrict the size of that guest cabin or the location with like double the setbacks or something like that. So in Cook County, it just has to meet the other setbacks that already apply to any other structure. Yep. All right, so the purposes, again, everything that's written here is really trying to cue into these purposes. So we're encouraging workforce housing. I'm not trying to create more second homes specifically, no offense to second homes. Where there's infrastructure, we're trying to preserve large tracts of lands to maintain the Cook County character. So I mentioned that we're using two tools that are in our ordinances. So the first is from the subdivision ordinance, is the open space overlay, open space subdivision. So that was the type of subdivision that Temperance Trails has over in Tofty, where 50% of the lot needs to be kept in undeveloped state, essentially open space. And then you cluster all your development in one location. So everything is based off of that principle, and applying that in these rural areas is intended to keep the Cook County characteristics. So if you have a 40-acre parcel, 20 acres is still going to be not developable from this tool. It's going to be maintained as open space and hopefully not give the feeling of a giant subdivision coming into neighbors. Also, there's a prohibition against short-term rentals within the overlay district. So that's the second tool that's being used here, is the usage of an overlay zoning district. So we already have one zoning overlay district over in Tofty, the Wildwood Acres. And so it's essentially you already keep the underlying FAR 2 or 3 zoning, so nothing changes for that. You know, all of the existing setbacks that had been applied are still legal. It's just that now we are laying another zone district on top of it that has extra prohibitions on different uses, but is more flexible on different setbacks. So it's a little bit of a zoning nerdy thing. I have some other provisions in these proposed amendments that are just going to streamline some development things. If you recall with Temperance Trails, we had some back and forth with the developer about wanting more septic information and wanting an HOA document before, at the conditional use level and then also at the preliminary plat level. Both of those stages, the developer was saying, I'm just not ready to give you those details. We really wanted those details, and we'll find out in the future if we really needed those details at that point in time. But I'm proposing that we punt and require those at final plat to give developers a little bit more room to really be efficient with their money, because they don't want to put investment in earlier than they have to just to pay to have modifications done again.
Could I ask, what's the current status of that, the final plat approval for Temperance?
I guess you'll have to ask the developer. I haven't heard from him in a while.
Okay.
Yep.
We will.
Yeah. All right, and why these changes matter, obviously, affordable housing is our crisis. I don't need to tell you that. We want to preserve our natural landscapes. We don't want to be changing wholesale zoning. One thing we could do is change it so we don't have a 5-acre minimum. We could do 2.5-acre minimum, but people who bought in the 5-acre area would probably be upset if we already did a whole blanket subdivision to giant zone districts. So we're trying to be very tailored and specific about where these higher densities are allowed. We want to simplify the development process for landowners and developers. And, really at the heart of all this is really trying to maintain our Cook County character. I really don't want people to feel like this is going to create a big problem. There's a lot of writing on this. Again, this is just talking about the process for these proposals and where we're at with it. And this really began in 2023 when I met with Jason Hale, the former HRA director. Tim Nelson, our land services director, and myself sat down with Jason, and I wanted an open field day on all of our ordinances. Say, Jason, you tell me, what are we missing to be more flexible for housing? And we had a lot of different discussions that ran the full gamut, and that's kind of what started some of this discussion. And we clued in on the open space, or on the overlay district concept as being the most flexible tool to allow these types of initiatives to move forward. Then about January time, I put pencil to paper to put these ideas down and sent them out to different interest groups and different stakeholders to give me some tentative feedback. Made a few modifications along the way and pretty much have landed on this proposal more or less. I presented to the Planning Commission last week to get their initial feedback, the Cook County Board of Commissioners at the Committee of the Whole meeting yesterday, and yourselves. I also presented at the Cook County Coalition of Lakes Associations to give those stakeholder group a little bit of introduction to this as well. And I've also had some side conversations with different contractors and builders who have probably about three or four of them now to get their initial thumbs up or thumbs down. And initial feedback is that potentially these changes could kind of put their thumb on the scale, so to say, to make these types of projects a little bit more doable for their industry up here. My plan going forward, depending on how feedback this week goes, is put together the formal legal notice and have that published in the paper next week for next Friday's Cook County News Herald paper, and have it before the Cook County Planning Commission at the May 14th meeting for the public hearing. So the public can come in person and speak about any of these thoughts that they think as we move forward with it. So the open space subdivision that I mentioned earlier, that's the kind of heart of the structure of all of this. So a conventional subdivision that's on the left is very rectangular. Anyone can create lots with administrative subdivisions in Cook County. They come into our office, I review it, I make sure they're meeting the lot size requirements, and they provide some additional documentation, and they can create up to 4 lots every 2 years. So that's a very highly used tool in our county. It's the main way parcels get created. The downside is it's rather inefficient, and it's not really good planning, frankly. If every 2 years you're creating 4 new parcels, you're just kind of working your way down, it's there's a little bit more efficient ways to do it, and the open space subdivision can be one of them. This is, you essentially look at the parcel, you say, where are the wetlands, where are the steep slopes, where's the ledge rock, where's the undesirable area to build? There's a dog kennel next door. We don't want to put all the houses right next to the dog kennel. Let's try to site all of the residential houses away from all of those poor building design features that has to do with a property, and let's create open space. So that's what all the green areas and the open space subdivision picture there. And then all of the yellow is the proposed new lots, and you'll notice that they're a lot smaller than they are in the conventional subdivision. So although it's the same, parent parcel, the beginning parcel size, you're making much smaller residential lots, but still maintaining that open space, and keeping that characteristic of the area. So, as we all know, wetlands are a big difficulty when we deal with development up here. And I feel like the tagline of Cook County Land Services should be, Cook County Land Services, all of the easy parcels have already been developed. Because everything that's remaining was intentionally kind of avoided, right? So, unfortunately, we're trying to develop the difficult parts, so.
Could I just ask, in those configurations, I assume there's a homeowners association or some district like that is formed. Do the smaller lots result in perhaps a smaller assessed value for the lot? And then essentially, if the rest of it is open space, I assume it's not assessed, and it might be a break in a price. I mean, it might be a price point if you're looking for affordable housing. I mean, it looks like that's the case, but is it?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question, Commissioner Gabler. Nice
Yes.
to meet you. I haven't delved into the valuation component of all this yet. I've got a long to-do list of the extracurricular things I want to think through, and I'll speak with Assessor Bob Thompson about how does he do the valuation. An HOA, homeowners association, would be required if there's shared septic or shared well. Road infrastructure could be done just through a road association, maybe. But I do have in these provisions that a common interest community framework would be required, and that's compliance with the Minnesota Statute 515 for CIC plats, if it is shared well and septic, for sure. And then there's kind of room for modification if there's different designs. I do foresee maybe some ways that, like, instead of everybody being clustered in one spot, like half of the parcels are on one half of the 40 and half the parcels on the other 40. So it wouldn't make sense maybe for everyone to be in the same association if they're geographically in different spots. But we're going to see how it goes along the way. But I'll try to have more of those answers by the May meeting, and I'm sure the commissioners will want to know if there's, the tax implications for property taxes with this type of design. One example, if people want to get an idea of what these lot sizes look like, is we do have a development, the Woodland Foothills plat in Lutzen. This is going up Mink Ranch Road, and they share a septic here, and these lots range from, I think one of them's like 0.19, but they're about 0.2, about a quarter acre in size, to like 0.3 acres. They're all pretty darn small. And so I first used this subdivision as my template when I thought through the lot sizes and just try to mimic what this could look like. So I have some of the smallest lot sizes in this proposal to be as small as these, and then they could go larger from there. So I have a little box up in the top right corner that says wetlands. So this is just kind of showing you that they have all the wetlands in that big open space, and they cluster all the homes in that little circle, and they share septic. So the residential open space is just kind of the selling points again of why I'm liking this idea. Maintains Cook County character with 50% open space, I've already mentioned. It allows the creation of a higher lot density, and we haven't really delved into that quite yet, but my initial proposals were saying you get 1.5 more lots, and I'll show you that in the math in just a moment. I'm bumping that up to 2, I think, in the formal proposal next week to the community to really try to put our best foot forward on housing density and just see what kind of if thumbs up or a lot of pushback, we'll just kind of see. And the phrasing is always up to 2 times density. It could certainly be scaled down if the site's not well fit for it. Only in the FAR 2 and 3 zone districts, so that's the 10 and the 5 acre minimum lot size zone districts. within a close distance to public roads. I'm saying non-shoreland area because if anybody's ever worked with the DNR on plats, it's not a ton of fun and it's very slow. So if we avoid shoreland areas, it's going to be a lot more logistically simpler. And strictly regulates the land uses, primarily to residential uses. So I looked at like our single-family residential zone district, and I kind of adopted those uses for these types of ideas, and then went a little further. And then that's just a visual to some of the points I just made. So again, that yellow and the orange, this is, if anything, much more generous than what it will look like. I'm going to work with our GIS analysts now to get a much more specified map going forward for more public communications. So this is just a basic zoning map on here. This is where the math is, and you'll see this is still my old 1.5 calculations on this slide. But what you have here is two different zone districts examples. So row A through C are using the FAR 2, which is a 10-acre minimum lot size. We have a lot of very large tracts of land in this zone district in the county. So those are three different examples of different parcel sizes, just to kind of see how the numbers could work out. So now, I was just making my revisions to this today. So that first row of FAR 2 on an 80-acre, with a 2 times multiplier, you could get up to 16 single parcels. So it does seem like a lot. It's 80 acres though, and if they're all clustered together, pretty small. That Woodland Foothills example, I think, has, I shouldn't have started that sentence because I don't remember how to finish it. I think it's like 12. I'll get a better number on that one. Actually, I think I might have, wait for it. 15 single-family homes on 40 acres. I gave myself the answer. So kind of use that as your template. That's already 15 single lots on 40 acres. So that's what that could look like. So now if you bump ahead to this chart, we just said 15 on 40. Didn't really look all that alarming. Hasn't generated complaints at all because it is just residential housing. I'm saying with this 2 times multiplier that we're kind of staying similar to what that looks like. So we can play around with that. I just wanted to give people some idea of what these numbers could look like. So I did have one person a little bit confused on this proposal. So this is creating individual lots. This isn't like extra residential structures particularly. The lot is an important component because that's how people get the lending, obviously. You can't get a mortgage to buy your neighbor's guest cabin if they still own it. So it's important that there actually be a parcel ownership component to this. The way that this would all play out logistically is that first someone would apply to be rezoned. Their property would be rezoned through the normal rezone process in Cook County to be in the new overlay district. It would be a process that is a public hearing. Everybody within a half a mile for a rezone would be notified and eligible to come in and talk about it. I think with that, we'd want to see some kind of like concept plan just to kind of see how someone envisions this happening. This would give developers an early thumbs up in the process. That's one of the big plus signs. They would see what kind of opposition they're going to get from neighbors really early in the process too. Very helpful information to be taken into consideration. And then I have some language about this overlay district and what that can look like. The primary purpose of all of this is for residential uses. So I have some of the eligibility requirements that I just spoke about earlier outlined. This would be housed under the zoning ordinance where we talk about other zone districts. And I have an applicability statement in there because, what if someone does this rezone to be in the overlay district and then they don't follow through with platting? Well, platting is a very important component to this, and it's really important that that be done to actually complete the project. So this isn't a tool that's eligible to be used for administrative subdivisions. It is intended to be zoned with the overlay district and then subdivided through the open space subdivision plat process. And then here's I think kind of the bread and butter of all of the proposals. So the overlay district and the zoning ordinance is where we regulate the land uses. And so this slide is showing you kind of how we categorize land uses. We talk about our permitted uses, our conditional uses, and our prohibited uses. So under permitted uses, those are uses that somebody has a right to do. It doesn't require any kind of special hearing. And you'll see it's very limited. It is primarily the one single-family dwelling. It is a duplex where each unit is on a separate lot. So I envision once these lots got created, someone could buy 2 abutting lots and combine them into one parcel, but then put on a duplex that's right on that parcel line so that you've got one parcel with a duplex, but it's technically 2 of these lots per our density calculations. And I wanted that in there because duplexes seem to be a pretty affordable way to get things in. But I've had neighbors have opposition to duplexes just kind of off of the stigma of having like a duplex next door. So it was kind of heartbreaking for someone to try to get an affordable housing thing up here and rent one side out, just for neighbors have opposition to that feeling. So if you're going to be in here, duplexes might be there. That's kind of where we're going with that so far. Home occupations, that's a use where someone is working out of their house, similar to like an accountant. It doesn't really have a very public-facing use. One accessory structure up to 1,000 square feet with or without the existence of a primary dwelling. So you put up, you buy the lot, it's undeveloped, you want to put a garage up, just to store all of your stuff while you're up here, your tools and whatnot, while you're building the house. We see that a lot in the sequencing of people doing development up here. And then one recreational vehicle. The reason that's in there is because recreational vehicles are often used as a tool during that transition of building houses, and that is a license through our office that we issue those. Conditional uses are activities, and you know, I'm sorry, I'm probably going into too much detail. Conditional uses, public hearing, may or may not be applicable, you know, conditional, and then prohibited use is just not allowed. So vacation rental homes and or bunkhouses.
I'd just like to make the comment real quick. I don't believe you're going into too much detail for this audience.
Okay.
I certainly don't feel that way.
Okay.
I'm really excited that everything you're saying resonates with somebody who's in the process of building on raw land and all of that. So it's quite clear that,
Okay.
that the language is laser focused on exactly your objectives. So
Great. Thank
very
you.
well done on that.
Well, and you could also think of the contributions of former Commissioner Skildum, who's doing the development off of Mink Ranch Road, and has been working on that for quite some time, and it sounded, I mean, just talking to him, this has been the answer to prayers, essentially. That's great.
Great. And so the size requirements for this overlay district, it is a minimum lot area of about 1/4 acre at small, and I have a little bubble there. The reason that is so small, again, is to cluster in that development near each other for shared utilities. Maximum lot area, I'm throwing out there of 2 acres. The reason I put a maximum lot size is because, again, my purpose, affordable housing. And I just kind of figure if you're starting to allow 5-acre lots in these developments, this could start being more attractive for that second home market. I don't know if it's going to make a difference or not, but I threw it in there. 75-foot minimum lot width. That dimension was set off of Woodland Foothills too as kind of a template. Setback distances, and I have that highlighted because I'm still kind of thinking about it, but I think those are the road setbacks we're going to settle on. And then the maximum lot coverage of 30% is kind of a self-cleansing sort of thing. It kind of checks to be sure that we're not getting too much development on these lots. If we just had like 100% lot coverage, we would start seeing a lot larger structures on these smaller lots. So it's kind of a way to self-regulate the sizes of the development within these areas.
I have one question. So you said the county road setback is 65 feet. Do you know what it is currently on the Gunflint Trail?
I think that's taken from the FAR 3 setbacks for county roads.
Okay.
I can double check though.
Okay.
All
right.
Yeah, so you'll see the county road is a little bit further away, other public or private roads. So that would apply if you had a platted road go into one of these developments. If somebody just had a driveway that was accessing, you can have up to 4 lots, create 4 lots that isn't a road, that's just a driveway. And so we might see more of that sort of design come out of this because people want to avoid the road design part of it. So there's no setbacks for a driveway, obviously. So we'll see how this is something that might get implemented and then needs amendments pretty quickly as we start seeing what it actually looks like. But also between the rezone and the platting process, there is a lot of control in the development of these developments with the regulators to be sure that they're not going to be problematic. And then step 2 and 3 is platting, and that's very straightforward for us. We have a lot of platting provisions in our subdivision ordinance. They're just not utilized because people haven't chosen to utilize them. Platting is expensive, right? You need a lot of technical assistance to get it done. So there needs to be a way to make this still make sense. And so this is where I mentioned earlier, I've got those final septic designs and the HOA agreement moved over to final plat in these provisions. Yeah, additional considerations. I'm almost done here. This is where I'm the kind of the final thoughts before I put the final proposal together. So I think I'm going to be bumping that up to 2 times density maximum. I'm thinking about, wildfires and, if we're putting 15 parcels way up the Gunflint Trail and say they're all going off of one road, it's one way in and out. Our subdivision ordinance does have stuff about fire, but I want to take a fresh look at it and see if we need to be more thoughtful about those provisions. Review road check, already reviewed road setbacks, we're good with those. Let's see, I want to add some language just saying that these developments might be in more rural areas. There's going to be logging activities and dog kennels the further away from the city you go, and that's just a part of life in the Roseau district. I think one thing about like zoning and land use stuff is it's been demonstrated in other areas that people are generally okay with things that they wouldn't have been okay with if they know about it in advance. If you buy the property knowing you're next to Hedstrom's Lumber, as I am, then you're kind of used to hearing a sawmill running. And so it's good to have that stated and nice and clear in expectations for people. And then the overlay district itself, what the tool, connecting the zoning ordinance with the subdivision ordinance here is kind of unique. I don't know anywhere else that that's been done yet. The land use attorney tells me it's okay. We can do that, just unique. And so the reason we're doing that is because the overlay district communicates to our staff as well as landowners what those uses are and that it's different. Some plats tend to put in all these little restrictions in the platting process, but if you're trying to regulate that land use in our office, you're not going into declarations and covenants of a plat just to issue a permit. So it's really easy for those things to get overlooked, frankly. So the overlay district is going to be a very clear communication tool about setbacks and what activities are allowable in these areas. And then there's going to be very site-specific vetting of these proposals. Again, for anyone who hears about this and might have concerns, I couldn't emphasize enough that, it's going to require at least 2 public hearings for the rezone and then the preliminary plat. And there's going to be a lot of consideration as to whether or not the site's even eligible to go up to 2 times density. The planning commission, county board might decide, that's a little bit much. Maybe you're only going to get 6 lots where you could have had 8 lots or something like that. So there's a lot of local control using it this way. No part of this is just an administrative process to create these developments. And then, I like giving developers a little bit of a green light earlier in that rezone process so that they can start putting pencil to paper sooner. And then just final thoughts, Cook County, you were talking about this just before I came on. We have an aging population. What was that, 35%, 65 plus in Cook County right now? And the demographers call it the silver tsunami that's coming at us with our aging baby boomers. So we need to find ways to be getting more of these smaller homes in our community, in my opinion. The only way I could afford to move up to Cook County was that I lived in a Silver Bay house, and I owned that, and I sold it, and that gave me the equity to be able to buy into this market. But that housing demographic doesn't seem to exist in large numbers here. So I foresee these being the kind of houses that, again, they're kind of self-regulated. They're purposely going to be smaller parcels and smaller structures. There's not going to be we're going to be kind of hard-nosed about that in some ways because we're being very lenient on the total number of houses that can get built. And then, we're having more remote workers, and also these are really nice tools for community. We need that transitional housing for people that are moving, they had the family, kids move out, they're stuck in a big house. There's not a lot of options for those folks to move in this county. So I see this as potential transitional housing, say if my mom wants to move up to Cook County as she ages. So those are kind of the bread and butter of where all this is intending to go and trying to make the numbers and the rules work out so developers have the means to actually put this out there for us. So at this point, I am totally open to, I'm not offended at any recommendations. So I would love to hear your thoughts.
Just a really a basic question. I just want to make sure that I understand. So if I own a 80-acre lot in a FAR 2, FAR 3 districts, so is this now available as an option for me, or do I still have the option of developing that under the current FAR 2, FAR 3, 5-acre, 10-acre lot, just conventional development, or I can go through the process of getting it rezoned as part of the overlay district, and then it'll be developed differently.
Right.
And with the more dense, I have the opportunity to develop more housing units on the same
Mhm.
80 acres.
Yep, that's the nice part with the overlay district, is nothing would change for anyone right now, like, or ever, really. If you don't want to be in this, you're not in it. You're just normal FAR 2, FAR 3.
Yeah.
I have land in FAR 3, it's not going to make any changes to me whatsoever. But if you wanted to explore this, that's where you would go through the rezone first to be in the overlay district. So no one is in the overlay district until they've had their property rezoned to be in the overlay district. And then once it's rezoned to be in the overlay district, it's kind of like you're the original FAR 2 plus you're the overlay district. It's just now the overlay district is more restrictive. So you can't do the activities that you used to be able to do in the FAR 2 or FAR 3. Now you're being regulated by the overlay district instead.
And one other question before, so if you do go through the rezoning and redevelopment, who has title to the open land that's outside of the parcels? Is that the homeowner association, or is that the original owner?
We've seen that in different forms in Cook County, for better or worse. I don't know if it's supposed to be in different forms. Some developments, some plats just have a single person own that open space, and then other plats will have the HOA own that open space.
Okay.
I mean, it depends on if people want to be a CIC or not. That might be a part of it, too.
Thanks.
Outside of the city, there are no height restrictions? Is that my understanding?
Oh, there's a 35-foot height
35.
That's the
maximum.
international
Everywhere?
building code. Yeah, 35 feet drives from IBC.
So is there any wiggle room on that on a case-by-case basis?
You'd need a variance, for sure. Height variances are tough. The only time I've seen height variances be approved is when they're associated with an industry where there's not a lot of flexibility. So like recently, the North Shore Transfer Station in Grand Marais got a height variance, but that was because they needed doors of such a height for safety and state regulations.
It's just for, we struggled with this with Gunflint View for a 3-story building, offers the developer some significant savings. But you have to have really, really short spaces to get under the 35-foot.
I'm not sure if you're going to regularly see a 35-foot structure on a 1/4 to 2 acre parcel. The aspect ratio just starts to be rather tall relative to how wide it is.
Yeah, there was some talk in here about multi-unit. So I was thinking in the context of those.
Yeah. And I skipped over some of the conditional uses because I was afraid you guys were getting a little falling asleep on me, no offense. People get kind of bored when I talk about zoning stuff, so I was trying to be thoughtful. But some of the conditional uses listed are like the 3 to 4 dwellings or multi-units as a conditional use. And that's where some of those things can be considered. A friend of mine was staying in a 4-plex up in Lutzen off the Caribou Trail, and it's just like tucked in there, and it's incredible, just like apartments. It's like, why isn't this everywhere? Nobody notices this thing, and it just doesn't make sense economically. Like the numbers just don't make sense. So I do have them as conditional uses in these developments, but that's where that's where the lot is going to need to be created intentionally, like the 2-acre lot maximum, to then get that 4-plex in there or something like that to make sense and be sure this.
I just brought it up because of that. It came up as an issue, before, and
I think
maybe it's not possible.
Yeah, and I think if we had a more allowable height, I think we'd get a lot more pushback from the community.
Well, that's, again, case by case. If it's nothing but public land behind around it, and nobody will ever see it, maybe that's, maybe it's desirable in that case. Obviously, if you're blocking somebody's view, of course, you're going to get pushed back, and that's not fair. But
Sorry.
I'm done.
Okay,
yeah.
yep. Like I said before, I think this is absolutely fantastic. It's clear that you've talked to a lot of people about the needs, the logistics. I personally found it a fascinating presentation. I don't know if I'm falling asleep. I was very interested. I've been through this process, which is part of why this resonates so strongly with me. Driveway, septic, electrical, well, this all adds up, and I was self-building, so I wasn't paying a developer to do a lot of this, taking on, paying with my own labor, and it's still, there's barriers to entry, and I think this is fantastic. It also, So I've read about this concept in a different iteration, and a couple of years back, there was a episode of, or issue of Fine Home Building magazine that featured 6 or 8 units built in kind of a community like this. And one aspect that I feel like is also present, or more likely to be present with this kind of a community is the sense of community that you get. We have some friends that are living in town. They love how tight-knit Grand Marais is in town. They'd love to move out to have a little bit more space, but one of the things that's keeping them from jumping enthusiastically in that direction is that loss of community, the fact that you can't just walk out your door and be, you know, at a neighbor's house for dinner. You can do that in this kind of a community. So I think that keeping the character of the community doesn't just mean you can walk out your door and there's pine trees. It also means you can walk out the door and there's people that you want to have a conversation with. So
Yeah. Thank
there's
you.
a lot, there's a
Yeah.
lot of really positive.
I love the, I'm Heidi, by the way, reminder, Griffiths, I work for the EDA. And you use the word resonate.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I wanted to say, is this presentation resonates with me personally, especially, you know, the type of product of not needing a huge house that's close to $1 million for 2 people. Personally, my husband and I were empty nesters. This product would be exactly what we would need and what we'd be looking for. I don't have a home here yet, and you all know, as a HRA, it's not the easiest thing to find for certain types of families that, you know, don't need a humongous house, you know. So I would personally be very interested in something like this for me personally. So it's exciting that this could be happening, and I would personally be interested. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
And one question, unless somebody else had something. So you mentioned short-term rental is restricted with this zoning. Would a long-term rental be included in that restriction? Okay, excellent.
Nope. So, short-term rental prohibited,
Mhm.
not even restricted, just
prohibited,
prohibited.
yeah, yep.
Yep, and long-term rental, we don't regulate, so that would be totally
Perfect.
allowable. Some of my discussion with the Planning Commission did have one of the Planning Commission members explored the idea of whether or not we should be more flexible about the short-term rental concept, just because it is a way that people can generate income. I want to steer clear of that thought, and, you know, we'll hear what the community thinks through the public hearing. I'm, again, totally open to being a sounding board to all the different ideas as we look at this from different lenses at this point. But just starting to be open to that really kind of erodes away at the whole purpose of all this. And because long-term rental is eligible, that is also a high need here.
Yeah.
We've got guest cabin listed as a conditional use in here. So the thought that, you know, I build the house and then I have the living quarters over the garage for the mother-in-law apartment or the ADU, you can still get a conditional use and, you know, do long-term rental. There would be no problem with that. And part of the conditional use is to look through the septic. If these are on shared systems, we want to be sure that it's building out appropriately for the communal system and that the HOA has, you know, the capacity to add on that extra demand.
Mhm.
Yeah, great question.
No, I think that's a good context to have as well. I would agree emphatically that prohibiting short-term rentals is key, and that, long-term rentals could be an income source. I was thinking of it more along the lines of there are people who enthusiastically want to live in Cook County and don't have the money to put down a down payment on a purchase. So, you know, renting and working in the community while you're able to, you know, save up for eventual home ownership, I think is an attractive option for a number of people that I'm aware of anyway.
To expand a little bit about the short-term rentals, this isn't going to be for everybody for every reason and every purpose, and so there will still be opportunity for people if they did want to create something like that in the county, correct?
Right, yeah. Again, this is an opt-in thing. Everybody is staying exactly as they are. I am not changing the FAR 2 and FAR 3 zone districts for a reason. So this is something that someone would be very intentional about. It's not a cheap process to go through to do a whole replat. So someone would need to ask to be in this rezoned area. Yep.
So Neva, once you've, by the way, thank you. I've already told you this is brilliant.
Thank you.
Say I'm looking to buy a FAR3 property, and it's not gotten the overlay, but my intent would be towards getting acceptance for that. How do you suppose that's going to go until it goes?
So people would apply to have their property rezoned in the overlay district. Are you thinking more on like the property transaction side of things?
Well, I would assume that the property may have more value if it does have the overlay as a possibility, as a developer might look at it. And if it was already approved, it would be worth more, or you'd want to act on it maybe faster, right?
Man, I don't know. I'm going to have to think on that some more. My whole goal is not to make property values go up more. Now you got me scared a little. I am, well, yeah, I am presenting to the Realtors Association at the end of this month, so maybe they'll give me some insight to how they see some of that play out.
Yeah, good question for them.
Yeah, I can't speak much to valuation and land property transaction. That's not my specialty.
Yeah. But the number of weeks in process is not as difficult as I can see it as other subdivision types.
Yeah, the rezone itself is pretty quick. It's like a 2, maybe 3-month process, depending on how applications come in and deadlines. It is the preliminary plat process that is very lengthy.
Yes.
That may require a full wetlands delineation.
Right.
So if it's the winter time, you're kind of out of luck until the leaves start popping out. So we do see the wetlands delineation be the component that slows down a lot of projects if people aren't familiar with those regulations.
Any other questions for Neva? Thanks for an excellent presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
We appreciate your forward motion and direction on this and want to support you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Neva.
Thank you.
And I think this is important too, as we talk about housing as a math problem. This is an opportunity for that math problem, this to be part of the formula in the future. So I'm excited for this. And
I am too.
I'm looking forward to the next part of the discussion.
And I think it's also a good topic for the update of the strategic plan, because this is, the single-family aspects of what we're involved in here are really important, and this is a total new direction in a sense. I mean, there are certainly HOAs around the county. I mean, I live in one, but it's just to the extent that it's trying to drive costs to be more affordable. That's really important, because that isn't necessarily the key to where we live.
And I think that equally important to that is that the HRA has been very successful in the early years, but in a concentrated geographic area of in and around Grand Marais for the most part. And this is really an opportunity to potentially develop or meet the needs of a lot of other parts of the county. So I think it's a...
Chair, and make a comment. This, as Neva mentioned, it was presented to the board yesterday. And when I initially looked at this, it looked like the impetus, which is one of my questions, where's the impetus? And it looked like it's coming from developers that are trying to find economies of scale. And so the end of this will be if the economies of scale translate to affordable housing. And I think that's something we've talked about, is the affordable component. How do we demonstrate that? This would be a response to a study that would say, where's our need? Where are we missing need? And this is something that older folks can move into, younger families can move into, and the community aspect, when you look at the psychographics, where people want to be and why they want to be, and then the demographics, which is the affordability. I think this is the creative response to that, and it's just that addressing the concerns that exist with short-term housing and something else is also being mindful of the community's attitude towards housing. So I think it is very positive.
Well, and I think it's the Tofty project is pretty good illustration of this, honestly. I mean, it's taken a while because of wetland delineation,
Yeah.
the easements that ran through there, and in fact, it's behind a school and they've got some rights. It was complicated, but the idea of putting up some smaller single-family homes and then some side-by-side, one-story duplexes for seniors
Yeah.
that would be attractive. I just think that's, so it's a good model, but outside of Grand Marais, it's almost essential. There's no affordable housing that's going to be done on a 5-acre lot with
Right.
having to put in its own septic, its own drill a well. It just isn't possible, and so I really credit Neva or whoever was behind this.
And Jason, likely.
And Jason, yeah, so I know Jason was hot on it, and we know you'll carry through for Jason here from here on.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, it's a good idea too. I mean, I'm thinking about people who want to live up here. They want to live in the woods, but they don't want to have a lawn, right? They don't want to come to Cook County to mow lawn. They want to live in the woods, right? And so this allows the developer to take a big chunk of this and leave it intact for habitat, for that natural beauty. And I think that's the way to preserve this as well.
Just to share, I had an opportunity to go through and actually look at one of the homes at Woodland Hills, one of the corner lots, the one that sits on the northwest corner. And it was amazing that you could look out to the front, you could see the road, you could see the center area, which is shared, and that's where the septic is. But I could look in 3 directions, and all I could see were woods.
Sure.
And it was really a wonderful, one-level, 2-bedroom opportunity that was affordable. And I think this has really great potential to solve some of our workforce housing needs, as well as needs for seniors.
One thing that, when you mentioned that, I just thought of as well, is that there will still be a need for defensible space in the event of a wildfire or something like that, but I think that'll be continued to be contemplated as well. Did you?
Just going to say that, that point that was made about, not having all of the demands of property maintenance, of living on like a larger parcel of land. I had that written down because, not everybody wants those responsibilities, but enjoys that aspect of rural living.
Yeah.
If you drive on Highway 7 down to 61, you can see people who don't quite share that. They like being on a tractor mower.
Like
and,
a 4-acre
and
lawn.
keeping it's acres of lawn, which it doesn't compute to me, but obviously that's just a market question, and some people
There,
love
I think a
that.
lot of that is,
But this is,
gives access to views of the lake, I think is one of the reasons why.
that's helpful. Any other thoughts, comments on this? Otherwise, we'll move along to other topics. If there are other topics, I think we've covered a bunch of other topics. How about committee reports? Well, we had the Finance Committee report, and I don't think the Personnel Committee has anything further to report, so. Any commissioner?
Put that dormant for a while.
Any commissioner items that you'd like to bring up?
I have one of, so I was interviewed by Callie Hawkins from WTIP reporter, along with Claire Stoddard, who's an owner of Cascade Vacation Rental. I haven't heard it, I don't know if it's run yet, has anybody heard it? Okay, probably hasn't run yet. Just happened a couple days ago, pursuant to the voluntary service fee well, it doesn't, 1%'s not a part of it. That happens to be what Cascade Vacation Rentals does, and not even on
That
all
could
their
be-
properties, so could be 1/4%, could be 30%, whatever they want to do. And it could even take a whole different form, but basically it's an effort to encourage private businesses to do a pass-through service fee on their service, whatever it might be, to the HRA. And and I was very clear on the radio that I can't ask for donations to the HRA. So I just talk about it from the terms of how useful it is to have that unencumbered money for the HRA. Obviously, just isn't, not to pick on Odyssey and Bluefin, their names come up a lot. They're large enough that if they did, for instance, a 1% service fee, it'd be a lot of money. And very, very useful. And also, was sure to thank Cascade Vacation Rentals for what they've been doing since 2021, I think they said.
Yeah, and it's,
And,
it must be around $50,000
It's
by now.
been 90,000 since it started, over
Was
90,000
it?
since
Yeah,
it started,
I was
yeah.
looking at last year.
And so anyway, she interviewed us on that, and then she did, at the end of the interview, just ask me how I liked being on the HRA board, so I just want to give you a heads up. I shot my mouth off on that, no.
Naming names.
I tried to be as complimentary and as positive as I could be, because that's how I feel. So, just giving you a heads up that that's happening. And then what kind of triggered that is that Callie had gotten, from our last meeting, gotten the idea that we are going out, Claire and I've talked to you about that before with your approval, to go out and talk individually to businesses that we thought might be interested in this, and we have a plan to do that, so we're going
Well,
forward.
thanks for your
That's
efforts in
mentioned
carrying
too.
that on, because it is important.
Yeah, it's just, especially in today's environment where we don't really know what's going on with government money, except we know the state's looking at a big deficit and the feds are kind of in chaos right now, I think it's fair to say. As I said at the end of the interview, the best solutions are homegrown solutions. So that's what this would be.
Okay.
So,
Any other director, commissioner items? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
I move.
Moved.
I move.
Seconded?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion about adjourning?
No.
If not, let's adjourn. Amen.
Thank you, Phil.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
We're up County Road 7, right by, where County Road 6 goes north.
And is there paper recycling?